It's strange how fast a place can disappear. You spend years surrounded by the same walls, and every corner and every sound becomes familiar. I moved out when I was 16, thinking I would visit often and be reminded of those familiar places. My mom moved out of the house I grew up in. I wasn't able to be there to say goodbye. Without the reminder of those places, your memory fades quietly until it's like it never happened. Once everything was moved to the new house, I came back to go through my stuff. There were photographs in my stuff unfamiliar to me, photos I've never seen or taken. I've always loved photography, maybe because I'm afraid of forgetting. A camera can trap time and hold something still, even after everything else changes. Looking through those photos, I realized there's so much I didn't know about my mom. I never knew she did photography. I'd never seen her photos before. I knew she loved farming, but never knew why.
My parents really brought art into my life. They were so into art. She was always taking us somewhere, and my dad was always also taking us to different museums. I was surrounded by these amazing artists, and
What did Grandpa do?
And Grandpa was a businessman.
Yeah.
He was the one who was just kind of letting it, like, creating the environment for it to all happen. And he grew up really poor. You know, his father was a photographer, and also my grandfather was a photographer, and my father was always had a camera, so I think I was inspired by that as well. You know, and on my mom's side, you know, they had a farm. Her father was a farmer. But yeah, I was the one capturing and documenting everything with my friends, and we would just go traveling, and, you know, I was always trying to capture the light and go over there and, like, let's go into, you know, check out this place. And
She took her camera everywhere the same way I do, but that wasn't the source of her passion. She was inspired the same way I was with nature.
actually, I think everything stemmed from this trip I had to Yosemite when I was in Quaker school, when I was really young. I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I used to play that we were, like, gathering herbs, and we were making medicines, and we were part of this beautiful culture that lived off the land. And I think I continued to have that same dream. How do we live off the land? How do I create this kind of almost like utopian place where we're, you know, there's like weavers and bakers and all these different people doing their art and somehow profiting from it. And so my biggest dream was to find land, and I traveled all over the place trying to find it.
She had my oldest sister when she was 23, but before that she traveled trying to find her place.
India, Europe, Mexico. This is in Mexico where I lived 2 years, I guess, 2.5 years. This is one where there's bananas and the mangoes and coconuts and the trees. And so we really were living off the land there.
She ended up returning back to LA, where she met my father.
I knew LA was not the place for me. It wasn't the place for me, and I always felt like I wasn't fitting in. And when I started homeschooling in high school, and I went to Ojai for the first time and experienced that culture I was talking about, where people were smoking and more connected to nature, it got me really thinking about cannabis, what the history of it was, where, you know, how long have we been using this, and to see how we are just completely shunning this thing that's a plant. So starting my own farm, that was such a big thing for me, is like how to create healthy soil. How can I just make the most vibrant, healthy vegetables? How can I make the most vibrant, healthy cannabis? This is the first farm that I started with my partner in Cobleskill, New York. My daughter Lily and our intern. This is my daughter Eve. She's helping to harvest. Here's Lily. She's holding some delicata squash with my hat on. It was hard to, make money being a single mom with 3 kids and be a farmer at the same time. It's a really time-consuming job. We were going to 3 to 4 farmers markets a week. People don't want to pay for food. They don't want to, they're always trying to get you go to a farmer's market and you've grown these tomatoes and they're like, oh, can you give me half price on those? And it's like, wait, I've got 3 kids here. Hold on. I worked, months just to get it here. So it was difficult. I first grew myself when I went to Hawaii and I met these farmers and they had a beautiful piece of property on the backside of Maui. And so we were growing a ton of different things. Cannabis was one of them. We would grow it under the guava trees and cover it with nets because the helicopters would fly every day to try to find it. And we lived off fish, we lived off the vegetables, we had these beautiful little huts, we could see the ocean right there, and we had a nice group of people living there, and it was a beautiful life. I started growing cannabis on the side at first to help me kind of get the things I needed for my veggie farm, which is so funny because I would plant maybe 30, 40 plants out in the woods, and then at harvest time I was like, oh, now I have money to buy my first tractor, and now I have money to buy my first greenhouse. And it really provided, and I think that's the gift of cannabis too, is that it brings this wealth into farms. Farms are hard to thrive, but when you have a cash crop like that, it's really beneficial to the farm. And I think it's also beneficial for people to really sink into nature. It helps people get out of their heads and sink into their bodies and really be connected with nature and slow down and think about what's going on and how to appreciate more. I think I ever wanted to have a normal job. I loved the different interesting jobs, the artists and the farmers and the people at the farmers market and the weavers and the crafters, and definitely inspired by nature. That's what really held me the whole time, is this deep feeling of being connected. I always had this idea that you'd be shaped, like your body would be shaped by what you love, and you look at these potters and their hands, and you could tell they've been doing, I feel strong, I feel connected, I feel like I'm with nature, I know when it's going to rain, I know when it's going to be cold that night, I know what kind of wind there is, I know I'm very, very much connected to the weather patterns, to the cycles, to when you seed something, when something grows, when something needs to be put to bed for the winter.
There's so many things that never ended up in the new house, but you also find things. In my case, I found something that wasn't mine, something that tells a whole story that I never knew. And though you may lose things, you gain a chance to remember.